I'll pass the gavel over to Senator Morrell. Thank you, members. In February, this committee held a hearing. It was a joint oversight hearing with the Senate Transportation and Housing Committee. And that hearing, we heard from a whole slew of presenters, ranging from the academic community to industry experts, who shared the findings of a recent National Academies Transportation Research Board peer-reviewed comprehensive study on technology-enabled transportation services. Additionally, we heard from stakeholders from all across California, including representatives from the various transportation services, the livery, the taxi, airport shuttles, the ride-hailing services, as well as local and state regulators, the CPUC Commissioner Randolph, San Francisco MTA, City of San Jose, San Francisco Airport, City of LA, and approximately 1.5 hours of public comment. All in all, the hearing shed light on the current challenges and opportunities with the ride-hailing disruption occurring in the market, and raised more questions perhaps than it answered. One things that we're certain about this hearing, including some commentaries from Commissioner Randolph, was that the Senate needs to weigh in. The legislature needs to weigh in. There needs to be a dialogue, a combined dialogue with the legislature and the CPUC to come up with a way that the state can properly provide consumer and worker protections within this industry. So we put together a bill that is a sensible and common sense approach to begin to answer some of those many questions that were raised and address the concerns we've heard. It is more of a guidance to the PUC for areas that they can work in. It's more of a may than a shall, but in terms of how we are guiding the PUC, but it does ask them to look into areas that address public safety. The general approach of this bill is pretty much an acknowledgement of, number one, the popularity of the new services and the consumer demand for safe transportation choices. And two, the CPUC's authority to regulate and license these services that was codified by this legislature. This bill continues to honor that. And the need to address public safety and consumer protections. In many instances, the bill directs the CPUC to study, assess, and make determinations on some of the concerns that have been raised and remain unsolved, including background checks, which were thoroughly discussed in the committee. Background checks require the CPUC to work with appropriate law enforcement agencies to study the rigor of existing background checks and propose a background check requirement. Background checks that shall be assessed include biometric and name processes. These are some suggestions. They don't codify anything, but they ask the PUC to look at what would work for this industry, including criteria such as criminal offense, sex offenders, sexual offense, fraud, et cetera, et cetera. It has been learned in our community that despite the industry's self-policing efforts, there have been breakdowns in those background checks. There have been failures to properly protect the public. Accessibility for the disabled. This population, of course, there was lots of discussion of how this industry failed to address the needs of this population. It can be a problem when you reduce one industry's ability to provide that service by a much larger industry that doesn't even provide that service at all. So this bill also would asked the PUC to look at the possibility to study how this population can be served. It also provides or creates a insurance, we looked at insurance. It adds detail to the study required in the Bonilla bill of the CPUC and Department of Insurance to better understand whether the unique insurance products are working. We need to know if the public is truly being protected by the insurance bill requirement that was established by the legislature. That's, a very small thing to ask. Data in the data sharing area, it also requires the CPUC to establish proceedings to require data sharing of the charter party carriers for local planning agencies. This has been a big problem in getting information to the regulators in how to make appropriate decisions because they're not getting any information from the industry. This would also give the CPUC the ability to establish a criterion on asking for important data that relates to these areas. This bill also addresses a very notable and glaring hole in the CPUC oversight, the need for enforcement. We had the commissioner come here and they said pretty much agreeing that there was going to be very little possibility of enforcing some of these rules and regulations. We want to know to what extent that is an issue. The bill is by no means, creating a level playing field. We already know that can't happen under the jurisdiction of the PUC. But what we can work for as a legislature to create some consumer protections. We need more, but this is a very, very small start to create some very necessary consumer protections. It authorizes peace officers to enforce charter party carrier CPUC rules, including those on TNCs. It requires the CPUC to adopt general order containing rules for TNCs. It extends law enforcement ability to impound charter party carrier license violations in case there are people operating in the market without a legal right to do so. And additionally, the bill restates the CPUC's existing constitutional authority over this matter. So this is a very small start. I think this is a very necessary bill considering some of the challenges we have been having in providing for the protection of not only the drivers, but the customers within this industry. So with that, I ask for your support. Thank you.
Any other witnesses in support?
Mr. Chair and members, Caitlin Vega for the California Labor Federation. We are here in strong support of this measure, which we think is a modest and reasonable follow-up to the oversight hearing that Senator Hueso held recently to really ensure that the existing regulations have some level of enforcement. Right now, even as minimal as the regulations are that apply to TNCs, they are largely unenforced by the PUC. So this would make those very minimal regulations somewhat more meaningful. In addition, it would allow us to get a better understanding through each of the components of the study of what more we should be doing to ensure that consumers are protected and that there is, as Senator Hueso said, this is far from a level playing field when you look at the kind of regulation that other entities are required to comply with. This is as far from a level playing field as you could possibly get, and I'm sure my friend over here will talk more about that. But at least it's the beginning of trying to understand what is happening in the market, what that means for consumers, and how we can try to create a more fair playing field. Thank you.
Mr. Chair and members, Greg Cook, representing the Greater California Livery Association. I want to apologize to the author and to the committee for not getting a letter of support to you earlier, but we are in strong support of this bill and urge its adoption. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members, Josh Pane on behalf of the California Bus Association in strong support of the Senator's efforts. Thank you.
Any additional support? Anyone in support? Opposition?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members. Robert Callahan with the Internet Association, here in strong opposition to the measure. Also do want to apologize for getting our letter in late. The bill was amended and in print on Wednesday of last week. We turned around as quickly as possible, but appreciate the opportunity to testify today. We have a number of concerns with the measure. I'll focus on what I would argue are the top three. First and foremost, the bill would subject these companies in statute in a way they've not been before to price fixing by the Public Utilities Commission. The analysis points out that under the state constitution, the PUC already has the ability to fix rates. This would take a step further with the advent of transportation network companies, which the PUC has regulated in a different way, very intentionally, given the technology and sort of the modern 21st century economy has regulated it differently. This would take an extra step and say it has the authority to fix the rates of competitive transportation network companies. This doesn't make any policy sense. From our opinion, these are not monopolies. These are highly competitive marketplaces. Consumers have enormous transportation options, whether it's driving themselves, whether it's a train, whether it's a bus, whether it's taxi, whether it's shuttle buses, whether it's transportation network companies. The thought that we would be fixing prices for these companies is very dangerous from our perspective because that would upend the business model. The business models are incredibly popular for the very reason that the prices can fluctuate. They can be cheap, they can be affordable, they can also be more expensive. Workers appreciate that, the drivers appreciate that. When demand is very high, they can earn extra income. Carpooling, shared rides, Uberpool and Lyftline are sort of the next wave of possibilities when it comes to reducing congestion and getting environmental benefits that we've not seen before. These rely on dynamic pricing. Without dynamic pricing, those carpooling services would really not be possible. So we're very, very concerned with that piece, and I would argue it's not minor at all to have the state put in statute that it can fix these rates. Secondly, from something that's very concerning to the entire internet economy would be the privacy, the allowance of any data that the PUC deems necessary can be gathered from the transportation network companies. We think this is an enormous data grab, which is unwarranted. Certainly, when you look at the status quo, transportation network companies annually are required to provide numerous, vast swaths of data regarding pickups and drop-offs, where they are, what the prices were, et cetera, et cetera. These reports are provided annually, and they are significant. To say in statute now that you can ask for anything from the company, not just on the statistics that are relevant to what the second piece of this data talks about, which is transportation planning at the local level. We're talking about anything related to the company. We're talking about anything related to the users, the internet users who are using these services. We're talking about anything about the drivers. There's really no limit. And that's, honestly doesn't make any sense. We're not sure why that would be necessary. And again, these reports are already provided to the PUC annually. They're required. And when the bill talks about for transportation planning purposes, for local governments, all of this information is already in the hands of the PUC, the relevant information. So we're concerned about that as well. Finally, I'll stop with our third big concern is that this bill we think is mistargeted. Why we're talking about suggesting all of these new requirements and or studies, which many of which in the bill are duplicative of what's currently going on at the PUC, why we're looking at that instead of focusing on ways of relieving the taxi industry from some of its regulations, which are outdated and onerous. I think that's a good thing to look into for the legislature. Focusing more time on pushing regulations that aren't a good fit for transportation network companies, I think is not time well spent, so we are opposed to the bill. Thank you.
Great. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, John Doherty on behalf of TechNet in opposition to the bill. Mr. Callahan from the Internet Association made a lot of the points that we would be making, so I'm going to try and stay brief and just cover a couple of additional areas. The first is, like to say that I think that we have a lot in terms of the goals that the senator has expressed with his with the bill. We share those. The safety, efficiency, and good service for our consumers is a top priority for our companies. He mentioned our self-policing efforts that there were some issues there, and I think it's what we want to make sure that people realize is that we are not a self-policing entity. We are regulated by the PUC. They have gone through an extensive review of what they think is needed. No background check is perfect. No background check is going to prevent every single issue, but we are concerned that the focus of this bill is very single-minded on one issue rather than looking at the modern approach, which we think is superior, background checks that the companies are doing. And so I think that what our biggest concern is that the bill, the senator talked about trying to make it a level playing field, and he didn't think he could get that far, but this was a way. We think that that's misguided in terms of trying to move back to a model that was not serving the needs of the consumer. So we would, both because of we think that you need to be moving forward and finding new ways. We think that the PUC is doing a good job of that in cooperation with the companies, and the concerns about the rate regulation, data sharing, and public safety remain. So respectfully ask for your no vote.
Any additional people in support or opposition, I mean?
First, let me start by saying thank you to Mr. Chair and chair members. My name is Dawn Cooks, and I've been a driver partner for about 5 months now. I drive primarily to support my family as well as to pay for a cost associated with running a small startup firm. Being a driver partner has been great for me in terms of flexibility. It also allows me to drive when my schedule works for me. I do not support this legislation as in fact, it would jeopardize that flexibility as well as my privacy by sharing my personal information and giving my personal information to local governments. This legislation will not help me and does not help me. Therefore, I ask that you oppose SB 1035. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good morning, Chairman Hueso, senators of the committee. My name is Timothy Burr, Public Policy Manager for Lyft. I'd like to echo the comments of TechNet and Internet Association, and Lyft signed on to the letter with TechNet and Internet Association in opposition to this bill. I just want to add one additional point to the many concerns which have been outlined this morning, one of which particularly hurts consumers, and that is the PUC fixing rates could kill the carpooling products and options that are now available and wildly popular to consumers. Lyft Line is a product that started in 2014 in San Francisco. It's available in San Francisco, Los Angeles, and as of Friday, April 15th, in San Diego. We've seen rates from 30 to 60% in the various locations, usage rates on Lyft Line. Additionally, we just launched a carpool option in the Bay Area on the 101 corridor with MTC and 511 rideshare. Fixing rates will kill one of the most beneficial and popular aspects of these carpooling options, and that is the price reduction for consumers. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you. And as you come up, try to make your, we've got a lot of people in opposition, so just direct. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and members. Matt Klopfenstein on behalf of Uber Technologies, and we're opposed to the bill.
Barry Broad with the Teamsters and Amalgamated Transit Union. My apologies. I was in a meeting in the Pro Tem's office. I just want to register our support for the bill. Thank you.
Amy Mago on behalf of the California Chamber of Commerce in opposition.
Jason Bryant on behalf of Travelers United, one of the state's largest consumer travel organizations, in opposition. Thank you.
Anybody else in opposition? Members, any comments that you'd like to share? Going once, going twice.
If I could, Mr. Chair, thank you. I think this is, I listen to the opposition and have a great deal of respect. Obviously, they're in my district and most of the time in every place, but I think that this bill
does a number of good things. You know, the leveling the playing field is unfortunately never going to occur, even though we try. But it's just not. We're not going to get there. But we have to do, I believe, some things that, this bill does do a few of those things. The disabilities, the access, I think, is important, critical. I like that. And the bill imposing greater background check requirements. I think that's crucial. There are a couple of issues, though, that I do want to, related to the background checks in the language, and I know you mentioned this, Senator, the bill actually directs the PUC to study various background check options and then says if any of them prove any benefit, then the PUC has to implement them. There's not much discretion in that. I guess what I'd prefer seeing is that if the PUC were to look at those different background check options and then selects the one they feel is the best opportunity, the best option for that. So I'd like you to maybe look at that in the future as the bill moves, if it does. And then the concerns over the impounding of personal vehicles. That was a concern. And last year I had SB 541, which kind of tried to deal with those, as we talked before, rogue limousine operators at airports and places where they come in and compete with the legitimate, licensed, and regulated and registered vehicles, and also with moving companies that were doing the same thing. So we actually put in there specifically that we would not apply to personal vehicles at the time. Now, you indicated in our conversation that if they're unregistered, but I think I just haven't seen that this is a problem in terms of vehicles that are working for Uber or Lyft or one of the TNCs, that they are a problem in that regard. So I'd like to watch that as the bill moves forward and see if there is a problem that needs to be addressed with this. I know with limousines we did have a problem, but I don't know if we've seen that, or maybe my experience doesn't equal yours in that. So I'll certainly vote for the bill today because I like a lot of the things in here, but look forward to kind of having the conversation to see if we can address some of those before I vote again.
Thank you. And if it's okay, I'd like to respond to your concerns on that because thank you, Senator Hill. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your wonderful comments. Currently, it's not possible for us to know if there's any kind of problem because there's no regulation in this area. I hope that we don't create a double standard for one industry or over another. If somebody is engaged in using their personal vehicle for business and they're unlicensed to do so, or they're not even regulated, I think there's room for some kind of enforcement. There's got to be some enforcement action that can stop that from happening. I think the industry as a whole should allow that or support that, because even they have to go through what they're arguing is a PUC regulation. If they're going through PUC regulation, but if there's someone out there in the market that is not, why would anybody oppose that? Nobody should oppose that. We don't want to encourage wildcatters out there in the community that will go out there and pose as a service provider when they actually aren't. They don't have insurance. They don't have any kind of regulation. And increasingly, it's more difficult to enforce that when vehicles are unmarked. They don't have any kind of permanent demarcations. They don't have a commercial license. They don't have commercial insurance or any kind of insurance at all. Imagine what kind of chaos we would be encouraging in the market if we allowed anybody just to come in and pose as anything they want to be and provide a service posing as somebody else's business. I mean, we wouldn't want that. So I think this is a reasonable requirement that we put in the bill, just because I understand that even prior to the TNCs, this was a problem in the state of California. People pretending to be PUC vehicles, or people even pretending to be transportation service providers that were not duly authorized to do that.